Ramon, it seems that Africa's about to get its own Braveheart story. I don't know what to make of this, man, but let's have a look. So this is a new film that apparently Hollywood's deciding to make for all of us and to bash us over the fucking head with. Like, I don't know what's wrong with these people. But apparently what we need is a brand new film called The Warrior King. Or The Woman King, sorry. And The Woman King is going to chronicle a West African state called Dahomey. And apparently this state, which you can see on Wiki, is, according to this new film, this really big anti-Western state that fought against imperialism, and according to the film, seems to have fought against the slave trade. What do you make of this?
Well, first of all, it's a stupid name for a film, The Woman King. It's called a queen, guys. That's the normal term for such a category of people. So they should have just called it the Queen instead of the Woman King. But also, so it's based on reality in terms of there was an all-female warrior unit in the Kingdom of Dahomey. This warrior unit was called a Goji, and yes, they did exist, except perhaps not for the reasons the filmmakers might think, because even a cursory look into the Agoji female warrior unit shows that they were trying to defend various aspects of their culture which one might deem distasteful today.
Yeah, so Matt Walsh covered this. And Matt Walsh, who's typically outspoken and has a lot to say about many things, actually did a clip on this film and the historical accuracies. And I thought, if you will, permit me to play it for you.
All of this, in spite of the fact that the Kingdom of Dahomey, who are the heroes of this movie, were ruthless killers and slave traders who conquered and murdered in pursuit of slaves, which were then used as labor within the kingdom or sold to buyers outside of the kingdom. As the Encyclopedia Britannica notes, before they edit this passage, which I'm sure they will, the kingdom was not, it's not just that they had slaves, the kingdom was fundamentally organized around war and slavery. That's what the whole thing was about. Quote, Dahomey was organized for war, not only to expand its boundaries, but also to take captives as slaves. Slaves were either sold to the Europeans in exchange for weapons or kept to work the royal plantations that supplied food for the army and court. From approximately 1680, a regular census of population was taken as a basis for military conscription. Female soldiers, called Amazons by the Europeans, served as royal bodyguards when not in combat. So, the transatlantic slave trade could only exist because it was furnished by Dahomey along with other tribes and kingdoms. This is one of the little-known inconvenient facts about African slavery that we've talked about before on the show. It was a system supported, encouraged, promoted, facilitated by Africans themselves. Now, in Dahomey's case, I should be fair, I guess, and admit that they didn't always sell their captives into slavery. Sometimes they would, instead of selling them, butcher them in human sacrifice rituals. Human sacrifices were killed for various rituals to honor kings, and then also there were other forms of human sacrifices, like the concubines of a king would be killed and buried with him when he died, those sorts of things. Now, naturally, all indications are this movie does not really grapple with any of these unfortunate historical realities. On the contrary, they paint the female warriors of Dahomey as freedom fighters. According to one review I read, they do acknowledge that the kingdom had slaves, but they pretend that the woman warriors were abolitionists, that they were pushing for the end of the slave trade, which is pure fiction, of course. Actually, not only is it fiction, but the slave trade only ended in the Kingdom of Dahomey because British blockades forced it to end. Here's another inconvenient fact. Europeans abolished the slave trade above the objections of many African and Middle Eastern nations.
Well, Matt Walsh has spoken, mate. What do you think?
Yeah, but here's this weird irony about modern day filmmaking and modern day storytelling, right? If you speak about the West, You speak about the original sin of slavery, which I think is a sin. Don't get me wrong, I'm not in favor of it whatsoever. So there's a lot of films about the evils of slavery in the West, and those films should exist. Some are good, some are less good. We can take it as it comes. But to to create a separate film, call it historically accurate, and praise people who were as active in the slave trade as the West was at the same time, and refuse to acknowledge that is just the height of A, hypocrisy, and B, also a form of historical revisionism that basically says if you are a certain race, you will be excused for absolutely everything. But if you're not of that race, you will be demonized forever and ever and ever. How on earth those two things can be reconciled in modern day Hollywood is sort of beyond me at this point.
Yeah, it's beyond me as well because if you look at the actual historical accuracy of this kingdom went around conquering its, should we say, neighboring kingdoms, which conquering kingdoms weren't exactly unknown of at the time. And the way that they would take over the kingdom would be to take the existing warriors of the defeated tribe and sell them into slavery.
Mm.
And they continued to do that well after the Brits and the rest of the world banned slavery. And obviously, what they continued to do after that, and people don't really like to talk about, is they would sell their slaves to the Arabs instead, because the Americans were closed off. And the Brits actually had to surround the place with their blockades of their ships, which nearly bankrupted England. And they had to stop them from being able to sell their slaves abroad. But apparently the Brits still owe reparations. I mean, it's kind of like, I can do what I want and I'm free to do that, but you should really pay the price because, like, slavery that I did, but you should pay.
Yeah. I mean, but the irony is the kingdom collapsed because of that naval blockade, right? In the 1840s, the British Empire surrounded the Horn of Africa to stop slave trading from happening. And that lack or that blockade of economic activity, which is what slavery was, actually killed off these kingdoms. So, I mean, if your kingdom is only based on one commodity, i.e., people, and that commodity is frozen or blocked due to superior power, there is no other way to say it other than to say this entire society that this movie is venerating, the only means of actually being a society was predicated on the very idea of slavery in the first place. Nothing else.
Yeah, 100%. But you know that this film, just like the Scots, whenever the Scots want to talk about independence from the United Kingdom, like the go-to film is Braveheart, like, yeah, freedom! And you know that's going to be this film, man. This film's all going to be like, anti-colonial, anti-whiteys, whiteys should pay the reparations, because that's the big thing now in the UN, right?
Yeah.
Should we be paying reparations, even though the Brits actually paid to free the vast majority of the slaves in the American colonies, even though the Brits paid to fight a war to stop the trades, the slave trades, apparently there's still this systematic racism somewhere that they owe reparations for, even though there's not a person alive whose father or grandfather was a slave. But that being said, apparently they owe reparations, and this film is clearly going to be used as a way to, I suppose, kind of galvanize people to that feeling. You kind of get the sense of that. And I think it's ironic because it's like the very people who were slave traders are the heroes of the film. And you're like,
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you see yourself talking here?
And a lot of people might think watching this, like, oh my God, it's just a Hollywood movie. Why do we care so much? No, it's important because this is how you create stories in a society, right?
Correct.
Hollywood is not there just to create entertainment. Films are there to have a message. Films are there to relay certain ideas. Some are good ideas, some are bad. Very few films are designed just to be entertaining for the most
Correct.
part. So, in this particular film, it would be a far better film if it acknowledged the underpinnings of the society while still saying that these female warriors were very brave. That's a much better film than erasing completely or lying about the fact that slavery was the only economic means of this kingdom, which was destroyed by the Royal Navy. That's why, to me, I watched a lot of slave films in my day. The best one is Django Unchained. It acknowledges that slavery existed and it made a very good, fun movie about slaves reacting against the master, and especially against other slaves who became the house slaves, the ones that were in favor of the master themselves. So Django Unchained is still a great slave movie because of those particular things. But these ones that lie about slavery or that deny that it existed elsewhere outside of the West, it's just pure propaganda, and it's going to be used for a variety of things that are completely and utterly untrue.
But Ramon, I hear you say, surely the critics would come up on this and they would never venerate a film that's based on fraudulent narratives that would clearly just be anti-white in their approach that is clearly very pro-slaves. Well, Ramon, I have this to show you. So this is Rotten Tomatoes so far, based on the critics' review. 36 critics have seen it so far, and would you know it? This film is apparently the best film of all time. It beats The Godfather, it beats Schindler's List, it beats... You take your pick, whatever your favorite film is in history. This film, 100%. It's the best film ever. I mean, where have you ever seen a film on Rotten Tomatoes with a 100% approval rating?
I think Toy Story was the first one back in 1994. But there's something else going on here. If you are a real critic, a real film critic, imagine hating this film. You won't have a job tomorrow.
No.
You'll be like,
No.
this film, it's bullshit. I give it like 2 out of 10. You're not going to.
They'll be like, you racist. White supremacist.
Exactly. So in essence, like disliking this film will inherently make you a racist person. So there's a lot of groupthink happening here, but also most of these film critics are white, and it's a good way for them to showcase their virtues about how great these African warriors are, who happen to be women, assuming we are all biologists. Because as far as I understand, no one knows what a woman is except for biologists, but no doubt the makers of these films and the critics who review these films are biologists as well.
There you have it, folks. Brand new film to look forward to. Please don't watch it. just be aware you're going to get a load of hate speech, and people. This film clearly thinks that there was a real Wakanda in Africa, and this was it, and it was spoiled by the Whiteys and their slave trading ways. So I don't know, man. I got nothing more to add. How about you?
Yeah, nothing more either. Have a good one, everyone.
Take it easy. Bye.